have a session now of question and answer and discussion before we turn to the methodology for study of the Quran, which is the bigger subject. This is a smaller one. So you're free now, we can relax. And if you have any questions or any comments, there's a microphone there. I can sip a little bit. Yes?
Hello. Assalamualaikum, Sheikh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Okay, Sheikh, I would like to ask you about, there are many methods nowadays in speeding the recitation of the Quran, especially for young kids, you know, that they can start learning Quran using a lot of method that they can complete in a short time and then start reciting. And the same goes to those who are memorizing the Quran. There are a lot of methods that are being introduced in the market now that they can speed up their memorization. Like in 7 months, they can memorize like 20 juz'ah. Is that also permissible, or is that a good method? Because the Quran is actually given to us in like 23 years.
Okay. There are others who are more learned than I am, and they have the expertise and the experience that I don't have in teaching children how to learn to recite the Quran and how to learn to memorize the Quran. So we must show respect for their expertise. What I can share with you is that do not teach the Quran, do not engage in any formal education until the child is 4 years of age. Let the child play. Let the child jump and laugh and dance and play with the flowers. And if you have to teach, you teach the child on your lap. It's only when the child reaches the age of 4 with us, the British system is 5, then formal education will begin. If you start before that, you are damaging the child. Mummy has to go to work, so the child has to go to preschool. Preschool? Because you gotta go to work. The child has to go to the daycare center where they have classes and so on. No, you're robbing your child of a childhood. If today Allah has blessed me to be a scholar of Islam, it's because my father and my mother gave me a happy childhood. Yes, I grew up in a happy home, and I was not a single child. No, we were 4 of us growing up together. And then Terengganu knows about big families. I don't know about KL. Terengganu, they have 10, 12 children. KL follows a different system. And when you grew up together in your childhood, playing with each other, you bond with each other. Don't rob your child of his or her childhood. Let the child play. When the child reaches the age of 4, any time after that, then you commence formal education. And you have a teacher who will come, and you have the Quran, and the child begins to recite the Quran and begins with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. For them in the secular world, formal education begins with putting on a tie for your child, throwing away the sarong, because the sarong represents backwardness. So you are destroying your own culture. And put your child dressed the Western way and send the child to school. But for us, it's Bismillah. And you will dress your child in your native clothing. And you will invite the friends and relatives to come. And my child begins a formal education with the Quran. And if you take a photograph, it would be a beautiful photograph. I once met the most important think tank of Malaysia in respect of Islam. It's called IKIM. So many years ago, I met with the chairman of IKIM. And he said to me, you know, we've been watching and observing your videos in IKIM, and we're impressed with your scholarship. I said, thank you. He said, but I have a question to ask. He says, why are you dressed like this? Why aren't you dressed in a jacket and a tie? He was a big man, so I couldn't lift him up and throw him out of the window. Yes, I'm proud that when you look at me, you see my civilization. I have nothing else to say, full stop. And so, let your child begin at the age of 4 with the Quran. If your child cannot speak English or French or German, never mind. That can come later. Last night I was at the Al-Hamra Integrated School, and a child 10 years of age stood up. He wants to ask a question. I said, come close to me. So he came and he stood right in front of me. And he asked me the question in flawless English. I was astonished. My gosh. Perfect English and no accent. Good accent. So yes, you can learn the English language and the French language and so on. I'm not saying not to do it. It's important to learn these languages. But your first language is Arabic, because the Quran is in Arabic. And so this is where education must begin. Yes. And if education begins with the Quran, one day your child can become a scholar. Yes. I studied in an Institute of Islamic Studies, and I graduated. And I can go to any university in the world there is today. Any university, anyone, without any inferiority complex, without any fear in my heart. I can stand and sit with all the scholars by Allah's kindness and grace. How do you explain? Someone who is a hafiz or a ustad or a maulana or a sheikh, what is he doing in a university? And when he goes to the university, he commands respect. Yeah, you got your PhD from the London School of Economics. So what does that mean to me? That doesn't make you superior. I respect your knowledge, I don't disrespect you. But it is because I have the Quran. That is why I can sit with confidence wherever in the world I go. That's what you can do for your own child. Begin education with the Quran at the age of 4. The methodology for study, how to recite the Quran, yes. But how to learn to recite the Arabic Quran, how to learn to memorize, you have others who are more competent than me to answer that question. Okay, next question. Anybody else? Wa alaikum salam.
As you mentioned that our responsibility to Quran is first to be able to read Quran. It's kind of culture in Indonesia or Malaysia. They start to, psychologically when they start with the short surah, so it is for the children. Is it right way to introduce the Quran, I mean especially to read Quran? Because mostly they start with Juz 30, which is a short surah. While following the flow that we have just now, we start to from Al-Baqarah, because following the system of the moon that you mentioned just now.
No. The teacher has more experience than I have, more expertise than I have. All I'm asking is that at the age of 7, that child should be able to recite any passage of the Quran. I don't mind if you want to start with from Al-Naba to the end, the small ones. He has more competence than me. But by the time the child reaches the age of 7, from 4 to 7, the child has 3 years. And by the age of 7, the child can recite any passage of the Quran. So the teacher has to ensure that that takes place. The method, he knows. Yeah. Yes? Come on, don't be afraid. I don't know whether I'll get another chance to come. I'm 77 years of age. Yes, come please. If you have any comments to make, please do so. Because I have challenged today the method that is there, every single copy of the Quran that you have. I've said this is wrong. So you should have some comments, yeah?
Assalamualaikum. You can enlighten me. Sometimes being informed that the better way of learning the Al-Hafiz is just to bombard the children with just memorizing without having to understand the meaning. In other words, when they said that within this time frame, just go ahead, go move until it finishes. Things will come better later. So like you were saying, it's better to understand what you read. Is it important to stress that for the very beginning of a child that doesn't speak the language? Or to just go ahead with that and go
Good question.
face to later? Thank you.
Good question, but I'm going to take a little time to answer you. The Quran is like the sea. In fact, Allah makes a reference to that. He says, لَوْ كَانَ الْبَحْرُ مِدَادًا. If the sea was ink, لَنَفِدَ الْبَحْرُ قَبْلَ أَن تَنْفَذَ كَلِمَاتُ اللَّهِ. He makes a link between the Quran and the sea. I come from the Caribbean, and the islands of the Caribbean are gorgeously beautiful. And the sea, the beaches are absolutely beautiful, like diamonds in the ocean. That's where I come from. So we have a tradition of going to the seaside. And in the mornings, you go and take a sea bath, the salt water. It's very good for your health, the salt water in the mornings. Particularly when you grow old and you're getting arthritis and rheumatism and so on, the salt water of the sea has shifa in it. So now, the Quran is like the sea. At the first stage, You simply going and stepping into the water. And you will sit in the water reaches you up to your neck, and you spend 1 hour and the salt is soaking into you, and you're enjoying a bath. This stage is like reciting the Quran from cover to cover once a month. But there is a second stage to come after that, when you learn to swim. And when you learn to swim, you swim out into the ocean. This is when you are reciting the Quran and you are understanding what you're reciting. Even if you recite the Quran and you're not understanding what you're reciting, you still have benefit from it. But you do not remain there all the time. You've got to learn to swim. And for that you have to have a sufficient knowledge of the language. So when you recite, you'll understand what you're reciting. Can you imagine that you have something called Salatul Taraweeh, and you go every night to the masjid for Salatul Taraweeh, and the Imam is reciting the Quran, and you never cry? The tears never fall from your eyes, night after night? Why? The answer is because you're not understanding what you're reciting, what is being recited. But if you could understand what is being recited, every night you will cry. That's the difference between sitting in the water and swimming. Quran is a miracle. The Quran must touch your heart, and that is when it'll happen, when you can understand what you're reciting. But that's not the end. The Quran has, this is actually the next session. The Quran has two kinds of verses. Ayat muhkamat and ayat mutashabihat. An ayah muhkam is an ayah which is plain and clear. No difficulty, no two ways of understanding it. And this is Ummul Kitab, the heart of the Quran. But then there are other verses of the Quran which are not like that. There are ayat mutashabihat, and we will come to this in the next session. And these verses cannot be understood unless they are interpreted. And only Allah can confirm that an interpretation is correct. So there is knowledge of the Quran which will only come to the world when Allah sends the knowledge with which to interpret a verse of the Quran. A very spectacular example is this book, the Quran, Dajjal and the Jasad. I made the ta'weel or the interpretation for the first time ever. No one did it before me. That when the Quran refers to the Jasad in Surah Al-Sad, the Quran is referring to Dajjal. No one has challenged me. None. Because it is plain and clear to everybody. This makes sense. But I must say Allah knows best, because it's an interpretation. Now then. So there is knowledge of the Quran which is still to come in the future. It's like millions of pearls at the bottom of the sea. And the only way you can get a pearl is if you learn to dive. So first you sit in the water, and then the second stage you swim, and in the last stage you dive. But this one is for the scholar. This one is for the one who devoted his life to the study of the Quran. Only such a person will be blessed by Allah to dive down. Many will dive down, and as you dive, you begin to penetrate the meaning of the Quran. You're studying the Quran as it ought to be studied. But the new knowledge of an ayah that never was there before for the first time, Allah will bless someone with it. If you keep on diving down, one day you will come up with a pearl, and this praise is due to Allah. I'm not showing pride, because if you are proud, Allah takes away your knowledge. This is a pearl, something that was there in the Quran, never understood before. Go ahead. No question. Oh, okay. So that's my answer to you, okay? Never mind if you do not understand what you're reciting, still recite the Quran. But don't remain like that. You must learn enough of the language to be able to understand. Yes, Fadil.
Sheikh, just a question. For us who now wanted to restart back the recitation, should we follow the date of the calendar, or we can start, or we should wait for the next new month?
Okay.
Which surah to start?
All right. From the time you learn this subject, you begin to recite the Quran. Okay? Don't wait for the next day. Start right away. But when the new moon comes, wherever you are, you stop. No matter where you are, you stop. And when the new moon comes, and this will be the moon of which month? Muharram, yes. And it will be a new year, 1441. So good time to start, eh? So when the new moon of Muharram is seen, no matter where you reach with the Quran, you stop and you start now again. Surah Al-Baqarah. And I pray, Fadil, that Allah may bless you, and you'll finish the Quran by the end of Muharram. At the beginning of Muharram, you'll be young and strong. And towards the end of Muharram, walking stick. And you'll resting with the small surahs. You'll be returning. This is the most important thing I'm saying today, this morning. By reciting the Quran this way, you will say goodbye to the fast lane of life. Time will no longer be moving faster and faster for you. You return to the system of time that Allah has ordained if you recite the Quran this way. Any other question or comments? No other comments, no other questions? Yes? So that means that you're all comfortable with my view that we must not chop the Quran. And so the first juz does not end at 141, and the second juz does not end at 252 Al-Baqarah. But rather, you're all in agreement with me now that the first juz of the Quran is the whole of Surah Al-Baqarah, and the second juz of the Quran is the whole of Surah Al Imran. Does anyone disagree? Or are we all in agreement? Do they understand my question? Are you understanding my question? Or shall Father speak in Bahasa? Huh? I wonder if you... Yes, go ahead. What's the question? Go ahead. I wonder if you're understanding me. Yes? Walaikum salam.
Actually, that's my question. I actually feel it's very much more natural what you are explaining.
Yeah.
About reading the Quran using the surah.
Yeah.
More than the juzul.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know, I live for almost 50 years now, and all the Quran actually has the juzul. So I'm just interested to know how does that come about?
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, and why we have not, if it's so natural what you are saying, why has that been adopted as the norm?
That is a good question. The question is, who did it? And why was it done? And how come it has been accepted all over the world of Islam and no one has challenged it? That's a good question. Yeah. I went to Yayasan Restu in Sharjah, and they're the biggest the publication of the Quran. I met with the CEO, yeah, and I asked him, I said, if I write a short essay, would you publish it and then publish the Quran with the juz that I have chosen? And he's willing. So I have to write a short essay to explain that Allah has prohibited this chopping of the Quran. Okay? But the problem is, since no one has challenged this, none in the whole world of Islam, they will say, look at Imran again. Imran again. His view is the only one. Nobody else ever said anything like he would take. So this man has to be misguided. He's the troublemaker. That is what I face. So what we're going to do is, I'm writing that book now, the Quran and the Moon, methodology for recitation of the Quran. And this one, when we reprint it, we change the title and make it the Quran and the Stars, methodology for study of the Quran. This is the afternoon session, okay? And when that book is written, the Quran and the Moon, methodology for recitation of the Quran, then we try to get sponsors who will pay the cost of printing. And we'll have the Quran printed according to the juz that we have mentioned to you. So juz number 1 will be the whole of Surah Al-Fatiha. Juz number 2 will be the whole of Surah Al-Imran and so on. And then whoever buys a copy of this book will get a copy of that Quran free of charge. And then also put that Quran on the market. But I know what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen. They're going to start attacking me. Yes, I don't know who did it. Nobody knows who did it. But this is really something which is wrong. this chopping of the Quran. And one of the chops, I told you, at the beginning of the surah, he took the first verse and then chopped, which is something ridiculous. Yeah. Only the first verse, a chop, you have to stop. Ridiculous, yeah. I don't know who did it. Any other questions? I'm disappointed in this audience, because I'm teaching you a subject which is critically important. And you all have children. You all have children. And I'm not getting your views. I would like to hear from you on this subject. You still have some time. We have another 5 minutes before we break. No more questions? Yeah.
First of all, I would like to apologize if my question is a bit out of the topic, but I'm involved in street dawah, and I recently met with a couple who is previously they were Muslim, and then they converted to I'm not sure whether they are atheists or agnostic now. So they claim that the Quran is not the word of Allah. They told us that they believe that the Quran is just the word of Prophet Muhammad, because when we told them it was Jibril that brings the verse from Allah and taught it to Prophet Muhammad, they don't believe it because they claim that we can't see Jibril. So we have answered the question, but I don't think we satisfy them. So what would you answer to them?
Okay. The first chapter of this book, read it. It is entitled The Credentials of the Quran as the Word of the One God. This is meant particularly, this is methodology for the study of the Quran, and the first chapter is written in particular for those who are not Muslims and who do not accept the Quran as the word of Allah. It is also written for those who have sometimes the dubious benefit of a modern university education. I know about university education because I studied in several universities, okay? So I know about the university education. It's not always beneficial. So for them, the secularized Muslim who has less than a passing acquaintance with the Quran, this chapter is for him as well. But I have something to share with you. This book was translated to the Bosnian Serbian language, such can be read by Orthodox Christians in the Balkans, the millions of them. And as a result of reading this book, many of the Orthodox Christians are now coming closer to Islam. I don't ask them to take Shahada. The schoolboy does that. I never ask them to take Shahada. No. I am happy when they come close to Islam and they have a positive relationship with Islam. Some of them even accept that the Quran is, yes, the word of the one God. And they accept that Muhammad ﷺ is the Prophet. I never asked them to take the Shahada. I never asked them to take the Shahada. No. I'm happy they have accepted the Quran as the word of the one God. I'm happy they've accepted Muhammad ﷺ as a prophet of the one God, and they choose to remain a Christian. It's better for me remaining like that, taking the Shahada and then coming to Islam and showing contempt for Christianity. Yes, because we want to build friendship and alliance between the world of Islam and the world of Orthodox Christianity, which is led by Russia. Any other questions? Or any comments? My audience in Malaysia is different from Singapore. I'm sorry, different from Indonesia. Indonesia has a fire inside of them. Oh yes, the Indonesian has a fire raging inside of him. And when I go to Indonesia, they're excited and so many questions and such. But Malaysia is very soft and quiet. Different from Indonesia. Any more questions or comments? I want to hear from you before we end. We have we have lunch and Salatul Zuhur, and we commence again at 2 o'clock. Okay? So you have an hour and a half. No question, no comments? Okay? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.